British comedy in the 1970s was like nothing before it. Anarchic, satirical, surreal, and often politically charged. It was a time when comedians pushed boundaries. Sitcoms explored real social issues, and sketch shows completely rewrote the rulebook. Today, whether you're laughing at The Office, Taskmaster, or Inside Number 9, you're still watching echoes of the 70s. But what was it that made this era so special? What were the key ingredients that made its comedy so unique and influential? And why, over 50 years later, does it still hold up? To answer that, we need to break it down. The absurdist chaos, the biting satire, the rise of the sitcom, and, of course, the risque humour that raised a few eyebrows along the way. Let's dive into the DNA of 1970s British comedy and find out why it still makes us laugh today. To understand how the 1970s changed British comedy, we need to start with the show that tore up the rulebook entirely, Monty Python's Flying Circus. Created by 6 Oxbridge graduates, Graham Chapman, John Cleese, Eric Idle, Terry Jones, Michael Palin, and American animator Terry Gilliam, the show didn't just rewrite the comedy playbook, it set it on fire. Before Python, sketch shows had structure, setup, punchline, end, but Python refused to play by those rules. A skit would begin, spiral into complete nonsense, and then, just when you thought it might reach a resolution, it would cut away to something else entirely. One moment, you'd be watching an interview about cheese. The next, a man would walk into frame and declare, and now for something completely different. And that really was Python's mantra. Never let the audience get too comfortable. Their surrealist approach owed much to the Goons, the 1950s radio show starring Spike Milligan, but Python took it to new extremes. Consider The Ministry of Silly Walks, a sketch where John Cleese's character, a bureaucrat, treats exaggerated, nonsensical walking as a matter of serious government policy. The joke isn't just the physical comedy, it's the contrast between Cleese's deadpan delivery and the sheer ridiculousness of what's happening. Then, there's the Spanish Inquisition, where a group of flamboyantly dressed inquisitors burst into mundane conversations, each time shouting, "Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition." It's not just a joke, it's a joke about how jokes work. The humour is in the repetition, the disruption of expectation, and the increasingly absurd torture devices they threaten people with. And the result? Some of the most quotable sketches in comedy history. This influence is everywhere in modern British comedy. The Mighty Boosh carries Python's absurdist torch with surreal stream of consciousness humour, while Inside Number 9 often blends the unpredictable structure of Python with darker storytelling. Even The Fast Show, with its rapid-fire, non-sequitur sketches, owes a debt to Python's refusal to follow traditional comedic structure. But Python wasn't alone in embracing chaos. The Goodies, created by Tim Brooke Taylor, Graham Garden, and Bill Oddie, took slapstick and visual comedy to ridiculous new heights. While Python played with ideas, the Goodies played with pure spectacle. One of their most famous episodes saw them being chased through London by a 50-foot kitten. Think of it as a live-action Looney Tunes, or an early prototype of Mr. Bean. But not all 70s comedy was about absurdism. Many of the best shows used humour as a weapon to skewer authority, class structures, and the absurdities of everyday British life, and few did it better than Fawlty Towers and Porridge. Written by John Cleese and Connie Booth, Fawlty Towers was a masterclass in tightly written farcical comedy. Basil Fawlty, played by Cleese, was the ultimate embodiment of British class anxiety, a man who desperately wanted to run a refined, respectable hotel, but was constantly undone by his own arrogance, incompetence, and sheer bad luck. Every episode was a slow-motion car crash, as his efforts to keep everything under control only led to more chaos. One of the show's finest episodes, The Germans, highlights its genius. As Basil tries to impress a group of German guests, he becomes so fixated on not mentioning the war that he, of course, keeps bringing it up in increasingly disastrous ways. The brilliance isn't just in Cleese's manic energy, it's in the script's impeccable structure, where every misunderstanding builds on the last, culminating in one of the most iconic scenes in British sitcom history, Basil goose-stepping around the hotel. Meanwhile, over in prison, Ronnie Barker's Porridge was taking a different approach to authority. Written by Dick Clement and Ian Lafreniere, the show followed Norman Stanley Fletcher, a wily inmate who survived the prison system not through violence, but through sheer cunning and charisma. Fletcher was a working-class hero. He played the system, mocked the guards, and outwitted those in power. He wasn't just funny, he was clever, making him the spiritual ancestor of characters like Del Boy from Only Fools and Horses, or even Mark Corrigan from Peep Show, both of whom navigate their own social prisons. Satirical comedy like this has never gone away. Shows like The Thick of It and Charlie Brooker's Screen Wipe continue the tradition of using humour to take down the establishment. But the groundwork was laid in the 70s. Sitcoms in the 70s weren't just about jokes, they were about characters. Shows like Rising Damp, The Good Life, and Are You Being Served? Thrived on strong, distinct personalities that audiences couldn't get enough of. Eric Chappell's Rising Damp gave us one of British comedy's most fascinating characters. Rigsby, a miserly, racist, and deeply insecure landlord, played to perfection by Leonard Rossiter. What made the show so brilliant was that it never rewarded Rigsby's prejudices. He was always the butt of the joke, outsmarted by his more sophisticated tenants. Then there was The Good Life, written by John Esmond and Bob Larby. A gentler sitcom, it explored the middle-class dream through the story of Tom and Barbara, a couple who abandoned their corporate lives to become self-sufficient. It was warm, charming, but still socially sharp, much like today's Detectorists. So why does 70s British comedy still resonate today? Because it laid the foundation for everything that followed. Whether it was Monty Python's surrealism, Fawlty Towers' tightly scripted chaos, or Porridge's sharp social satire, these shows changed comedy forever. And while styles have evolved, the DNA of 1970s humour is still everywhere. Whether it's in The Office, Peep Show, or Inside Number 9, comedy has changed. But the best of the 70s, that's still as funny as ever.
Well, that's the last time I play the tart for you, Jelly.